On a dusty street, a 6-year-old girl kneels crying desperately while a man in an expensive suit raises a stick, ready to punish the hungry child who dared to take a piece of bread. The orphan, responsible for her 3-year-old little brother, risked everything for a crumb of food. But when the rich man is about to strike the blow, a white horse comes galloping. What this brave animal does to protect the girl will expose the most shocking truth about power, injustice, and how far kindness can go to face human cruelty. Before we continue, if you love animals as much as we do, subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any moving stories. Thank you. Let's get back to our story. The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty dirt road, kicking up small clouds of dust that danced on the hot wind. Marina pressed her parched lips together, her stomach twisting in another sharp pang of hunger. 3 days, 3 long days without a piece of bread, without a drop of milk for little Leo, who slept restlessly in the abandoned corner where they had found shelter. The 6-year-old girl watched the bakery owned by Mr. Augustus Blackwood, the wealthiest man in the town of Harmony Creek. Her small, trembling hand clutched the frayed beige dress, grimy with dust and time. Her bare feet knew every stone on that road, every pothole to hide in when the adults shouted or when fear gripped her small heart. There it was again, the golden brown loaf in the bakery window, still warm, exuding an aroma that made her senses beg for just one bite. Marina knew it wasn't hers, knew that taking it meant trouble, but Leo had cried so much the night before that her little heart couldn't bear to see her baby brother waste away. Just a small piece, she murmured to herself, the words nearly lost in the wind. Leo has to eat. With silent steps learned on the streets that had become her home after her parents' death, Marina approached the bakery's low window. Her brown eyes, too large for her thin face, nervously scanned the surroundings. The employee had left a few minutes ago, probably to deliver bread to a house in the rich part of town. Her small, dirty hands reached for the windowsill. The bread was there, so close, so golden and promising. Marina thought of Leo, of his weak cries the night before, of how much weight he had lost in the last few weeks. She could no longer wait for scraps or the rare charity of passers-by. With a swift movement, her fingers touched the warm crust of the bread. For an instant, she felt victorious, as if she had conquered the world's greatest treasure. But the happiness lasted only a second. "Gotcha, you little sewer rat!" The employee's harsh voice echoed through the bakery walls like a threatening thunderclap. Large, calloused hands grabbed Marina's thin arms, lifting her off the ground with unnecessary brutality. The bread fell into the dust, and with it, all the hope that had shone in her eyes. "Mr. Blackwood is going to hear about this. You'll learn not to steal." Marina tried to explain, her small, trembling voice pleading, "Please, my little brother is hungry, I just wanted—" But her words were lost in the hot afternoon air as she was dragged down the main street, where residents began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Whispers of pity mixed with murmurs of approval from those who believed that a street kid's got to learn a lesson. Augustus Blackwood emerged from the shadow of his mansion like a storm dressed in an expensive blue suit. His cold eyes scanned the scene, the dirty girl held by his employee, the bread trampled in the dirt, the onlookers. A cruel smile curved his lips as he took the hardwood cane he always carried, a symbol of his absolute authority in this forgotten town. "So, we have a little thief in our town." His voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. "You'll learn today that no one, absolutely no one, touches what's mine." Marina fell to her knees on the dirt ground, tears creating small rivers on her filthy face. Her small hands clasped together in a desperate plea, her lips trembling as she tried to form words that might touch the heart of this terrible man. "Please, sir, I have a tiny little brother. He hasn't eaten in 3 days. I just wanted—" But Augustus Blackwood raised the cane above his head, his eyes gleaming with a cruelty that made even some of the townspeople flinch. The heavy silence of the afternoon was broken only by the distant sound of galloping hooves approaching rapidly. A horse as white as snow appeared on the horizon, running with an urgency that no one could explain. The white horse burst onto the main street like a bolt of hope cutting through the darkness of despair. Its hooves hammered the earth with determination, creating small explosions of dust that rose like golden clouds under the afternoon sun. Augustus Blackwood hesitated for a moment, the cane still raised, confused by the sudden appearance of his own animal. "Tempest," he muttered, frowning. The horse had never left the stables without permission, let alone galloped through the town streets with such urgency. Marina looked up through her tears, seeing the majestic creature approach as if from a dream. The horse slowed its gallop. As it drew near, its dark, intelligent eyes fixing alternately on the kneeling girl and the man wielding the cane. There was something almost human in the way Tempest assessed the situation. "Get out of the way, you useless animal!" Augustus shouted, gesturing with the cane. "Get back to the stable." But Tempest did not obey. Instead, it deliberately positioned itself between Marina and its owner, nostrils flared and muscles tense. The horse lowered its head, looking directly into the girl's eyes, as if it could see past the dirt and fear to the purity of a desperate heart. Marina instinctively reached out her hand, her small fingers touching the animal's soft muzzle. Tempest remained still, allowing the contact, and for a magical moment the girl and the horse seemed to share a silent understanding that transcended words. "I said get out of the way." Augustus Blackwood lunged forward in a rage, trying to push the horse aside. "You'll see what—" But before he could finish the sentence, Tempest turned and with calculated force shoved the man with its muzzle. Augustus stumbled, lost his balance, and fell with a thud onto the dusty ground, his expensive blue suit now covered in dirt. The cane rolled several feet away, out of his reach. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd of onlookers. They had never seen anything like it. The most powerful man in town, humbled by his own horse, sitting in the dust like a common person. Marina took advantage of the confusion to scramble to her feet. Her trembling legs could barely support her, but the adrenaline of the moment gave her strength. Tempest inclined its head in her direction, as if encouraging her to run. "Get that girl!" Augustus bellowed, red with rage and humiliation, trying to stand while brushing the dirt off his suit. "Don't let her escape!" But Marina had already disappeared between the poor houses on the other side of the street, running with a speed only desperation could provide. Her feet knew every shortcut, every dark alley where she could hide. Behind her, she heard Augustus Blackwood's shouts, ordering his men to find her. Tempest remained on the spot for a few more moments, its eyes still fixed on the direction Marina had fled. Then, with dignity, it walked slowly back to the stables, completely ignoring its owner's furious calls. Marina ran until she couldn't anymore, her small lungs burning with the effort. She stopped, panting, behind an abandoned house where she had left Leo sleeping on some old rags she had managed to find. The 3-year-old boy woke as he heard her arrive, his big blue eyes wide and frightened. "Aina!" he called in his tiny voice, using the affectionate nickname he had created for her. Marina knelt beside her brother, hugging him tightly. Her hands were empty. The bread had been lost in the chaos. But something different shone in her eyes now. Hope. Someone, or rather, something had protected her. A white horse that had appeared like an earthly angel. "Leo," she whispered, kissing her little brother's forehead, "something incredible happened today. I think we have a friend." But in Augustus Blackwood's mansion, fury was brewing like a storm about to devastate everything in its path. Augustus Blackwood's mansion simmered with a dark energy as the richest man in Harmony Creek paced his luxurious office. The imported mahogany walls seemed to absorb his anger as he repeatedly slammed his fist on the desk, making the expensive objects on it tremble. Humiliated by a filthy girl and a stupid animal. The words dripped like venom from his clenched lips. 40 years building my reputation in this town, and in 5 minutes it all goes down the drain. His most loyal employee, Gary, stood near the door, hands clasped nervously. He knew his boss's fits of rage well and knew it was best to let him vent before trying to say anything. Augustus stopped in front of the window that overlooked the entire town. From up there, he could see the poor shacks where that wretched girl was probably hiding, planning her next theft. The very thought that someone so insignificant could defy him made him boil with hatred. "Sir," Gary finally dared to speak, "what do you want us to do?" Augustus turned slowly, his cold eyes glinting with a calculated malice. "First, we'll deal with that treacherous animal. Tempest will learn what happens to those who disrespect me. Lock him in the dark stall. No water, no food. We'll see if he's still playing the hero when he's dying of thirst. But sir, Tempest is your favorite horse. You've always said, I said, do as I command," Augustus shouted, making Gary take a step back. "And as for that rat and her brother, I want them found. Offer a reward. Say 2 50-pound bags of flour for anyone who brings information on where they're hiding." Gary nodded nervously. He knew the townspeople well. Most were always struggling. For 2 bags of flour, many would be willing to turn in even defenseless children. "And there's more," Augustus continued, his voice taking on an even darker tone. "I want you to spread the word that these children are dangerous. Say they're violent thieves, that they might be carrying diseases. Make everyone afraid to help them." The employee swallowed hard. He knew he was being instructed to spread cruel lies about 2 starving children, but he didn't have the courage to confront his boss. His own family depended on his job at the Blackwood mansion. "Yes, sir. But what if someone questions it? People saw it was just a little girl asking for food." "Then you will remind them who pays the salaries in this town, who owns the land their houses are built on, who decides if their children will have a job when they grow up." Augustus smiled coldly. "People forget what they've seen very quickly when their survival is at stake." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Marina stayed awake as night fell. Leo had finally fallen asleep in her arms, but she couldn't get the image of the white horse that had appeared to protect her out of her mind. Why would an animal do that? Why would it risk its owner's wrath for a stranger? She gently stroked her brother's disheveled hair, feeling the weight of responsibility on her small shoulders. Leo was all she had left in the world, and she would do anything to keep him alive and safe. But how could she protect him if she couldn't even find food? A distant noise caught her attention, voices approaching, lanterns swinging in the darkness. Marina hugged Leo tighter, her heart racing. She knew Augustus Blackwood wouldn't give up on his revenge so easily. "She's got to be around here somewhere." A man's voice echoed between the houses. "The boss said he's giving 2 bags of flour to whoever finds them." Marina held her breath, praying that Leo wouldn't wake up and start crying. The voices were getting dangerously close to her hiding spot. Across town, in the stables of the Blackwood mansion, Tempest remained locked in the darkest, tightest stall. The powerful white horse had been reduced to a prisoner, but its eyes still shone with the determination that not even its owner's cruelty could break. Something was changing in Harmony Creek, and everyone could feel the tension in the air. Joe Miller had been caring for horses for 52 years of his life. His calloused hands knew every twitch, every breath, every whinny an animal made when in pain or fear. So, when he arrived at the stables that grey morning and heard the anguished neigh coming from the dark stall, his heart clenched like a fist. "Tempest," he called softly, approaching the locked door. "What have they done to you, my boy?" The white horse was visibly weakened after a full night without water or food. Its legs trembled slightly, and the eyes that had always shone with intelligence now showed signs of suffering. Even so, upon seeing Joe, Tempest approached the bars, extending its muzzle as if asking for help. Mr. Blackwood left very clear orders. Gary appeared behind Joe, his voice laced with discomfort. The animal is to receive no water or food until further notice. Joe turned slowly, his grayish-blue eyes meeting the younger employees. "Gary, do you have kids?" "I do, sir. 2 boys." "Then you know that punishing an innocent child or an animal teaches nothing but cruelty." Joe turned his attention back to Tempest. This horse did what any being with a heart would do. He protected a helpless child. But the boss's orders go against God's nature. Joe slowly opened the stall door, and I won't let an animal suffer for doing the right thing. Tempest staggered out, but as soon as Joe brought fresh water, the horse drank with a gratitude that touched the old caretaker's heart. It was as if the animal knew it was being saved by someone who understood its kind nature. "Joe, if Mr. Blackwood finds out, leave that to me." The old man stroked Tempest's neck affectionately. "Some risks are worth taking." As Tempest recovered, Joe couldn't stop thinking about the scene he had witnessed the day before. The image of the small girl kneeling in the dust, begging for mercy, haunted his thoughts. He himself had been poor as a child. He knew the desperate hunger that makes a person risk everything for a piece of bread. "Rose," he called when he got home for lunch. His wife was in the kitchen making a simple soup with vegetables from their small garden. "What is it, Joe? You look worried." Rose Miller was a woman of 60, her grey hair always tied in a simple bun, and her hands seemed made for offering comfort. She had lost her only son at the age of 5 to a fever, and ever since she carried a pain in her chest that only her love for animals and the neighborhood children could soothe. Joe told his wife about Tempest, about the girl, about the whole situation unfolding in the town. Rose listened in silence, but her eyes filled with tears when he described the child's desperation. "Joe, we have to find these children," she said, drying her eyes with her apron. "A 6-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy, all alone in the world. That's not right." "Rose, you know Mr. Blackwood is offering a reward for them. The whole town is looking. Then we have to find them first." That afternoon, Joe returned to the stables with a heavy heart. Tempest had recovered considerably, but there was something different about its behavior. The horse was restless, pacing, back and forth as if it wanted to get out. "What is it, boy? What's bothering you?" Tempest approached and gently nudged Joe toward the stable doors. The behavior was so unusual that the old caretaker decided to follow the animal's instinct. He opened the gate and let Tempest out. The horse didn't bolt as expected. Instead, it walked slowly through the town streets, stopping frequently to sniff the air or look in specific directions. Joe followed, intrigued by this almost human behavior. It was when they neared the abandoned houses at the end of the main street that Joe heard it. A quiet cry, almost imperceptible, coming from behind one of the ruined structures. Tempest had stopped completely, its ears turned toward the sound. "Marina," Joe called softly. "Girl, are you there?" The crying stopped immediately, replaced by a tense silence. Joe approached slowly, his hands outstretched to show he meant no harm. "I take care of the horse that protected you yesterday," he said in a gentle voice. "He led me to you." A small head cautiously appeared from behind the debris, large, frightened eyes watching the unknown man and the white horse by his side. Marina held Leo tighter against her chest, her heart beating so loud she was sure the strange man could hear it. But there was something in Joe's voice, a kindness she hadn't heard in a long time that kept her from running away immediately. "Are you hungry?" Joe asked, keeping a respectful distance. "My wife Rose made soup today. There's plenty for everyone." Leo lifted his head from his sister's shoulder, his blue eyes fixing on the white horse that stood calm and majestic beside. The man. The boy had never seen such a beautiful animal up close. "Horsey," Leo murmured in his tiny voice, reaching a small hand toward Tempest. Joe smiled, his heart warming at the child's innocence. "That's right, son. This is Tempest. He's a very special horse, and it seems he likes you two very much." As if understanding the words, Tempest slowly approached and lowered its head to the children's level. Leo giggled softly, a sound Marina hadn't heard in weeks, and carefully touched the animal's soft muzzle. "He won't hurt you," Joe assured them, watching the interaction with teary eyes. "In fact, I think he wants to protect you." Marina finally found the courage to speak, her voice coming out as a whisper. You won't turn us into the bad man?" "Never, my child." Joe knelt to be at her eye level. "I saw what happened yesterday. You were just trying to feed your little brother. There's nothing wrong with that." Tears began to roll down Marina's dirty face. It was the first time in a long time that someone had spoken to her with kindness, that had called her child with genuine affection. "My name is Joe," he continued, "and I promise you'll be safe with me and my wife Rose. But first, we need to get out of here. Mr. Blackwood's men are searching all over town." Marina hesitated for a moment, every survival instinct screaming at her to be wary. But Leo was smiling at the horse, and it had been so long since she'd seen him happy. Besides, Tempest had protected her yesterday. If the animal trusted this man, maybe she could too. "Okay," she whispered. Joe helped the children to their feet, noticing how fragile and thin they were. Leo could barely stand on his own, and Marina was trembling with weakness. His heart broke, imagining how many days they had gone without a proper meal. "Come on! Tempest will protect us on the way," he said, helping Marina get Leo onto her back. "My house isn't far, but we'll take a path where no one will see us." The journey to the miller's house was through back alleys and lanes that Joe knew well. Tempest followed them silently, like a watchful guardian, its ears always alert for any sign of danger. Rose was waiting at the door when she saw them arrive. Her hands flew to her chest at the sight of the children, and immediate tears welled in her motherly eyes. "Oh, my heavens," she murmured, rushing toward them. "Look how thin you are." Without hesitation, Rose wrapped both children in a warm hug that smelled of herbal soap and unconditional love. Marina melted into the embrace, feeling for the first time in months what it was like to be truly safe. "Come, come." Rose led them into the simple but cozy house. "I'll warm up the soup and prepare a warm bath for you. Joe, bring some clean clothes from the chest." While Rose cared for the children with the efficiency of an experienced mother, Joe watched from the window. He knew they had taken a dangerous step by bringing Marina and Leo home. If Augustus Blackwood found out, "We're doing the right thing," Rose said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "These children need care, not punishment." Leo had fallen asleep in Rose's lap after drinking all the soup, finally relaxed and fed. Marina remained awake, still a bit wary, but her eyes no longer showed the absolute terror from before. "Mrs. Rose," she said in a small voice, "are you sure we won't bring you trouble?" Rose stroked the girl's hair with infinite tenderness. "My dear, problems can be solved. A guilty conscience is something you can't fix." Outside, Tempest grazed peacefully in the small yard, but its senses remained on high alert. Something told it that difficult days were still ahead. 3 days passed like a golden dream at the miller's house. Marina had regained some color in her cheeks, and Leo ran around the small yard chasing chickens, his crystal-clear laughter filling the air with a music Rose hadn't heard in years. Tempest was always nearby, a silent guardian who never fully let its guard down. On the morning of the fourth day, Joe left early for the stables, trying to maintain a normal routine so as not to arouse suspicion. Augustus Blackwood had been particularly irritable, questioning employees and pressing for information about the missing children. "Someone is hiding those pests," Blackwood growled, pacing the stables like a caged storm. "No one just vanishes in a town this size." Joe kept a neutral expression as he brushed the horses, but his heart pounded every time his boss got close. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone discovered what was happening. "And you, Joe," Blackwood turned on him suddenly, "seen anything suspicious? Any strange movements in your part of town?" "No, Mr. Blackwood. Nothing out of the ordinary." Joe forced his voice to remain steady. "Would you like me to be more vigilant?" "Everyone must be vigilant. I've offered too good a reward for those children to stay hidden." Blackwood's eyes gleamed with malice. "And when I find them, I'll make sure the whole town sees what happens to those who defy me." Joe swallowed hard, pretending to focus on his work, but Blackwood wasn't finished. "By the way, Tempest has been acting strangely lately. Sometimes he disappears for hours and comes back dirty, as if he's been rolling in the dirt." He examined the horse with suspicious eyes. "Do you have any idea what might be going on?" "Horses like to explore sometimes, sir, especially when they're restless." Joe prayed his voice wouldn't betray his nervousness. "I can keep a closer eye on him, if you'd prefer." Blackwood nodded slowly, but his eyes remained fixed on Joe for an uncomfortably long time. "Do that. And if you notice anything suspicious, anything at all, I want to be informed immediately." When Blackwood finally walked away, Joe felt his legs weaken. He had to warn Rose. They needed to be even more careful or find a permanent solution to protect the children. Meanwhile, in the miller's simple home, Marina was helping Rose prepare lunch. The girl had quickly adapted to the domestic routine, always eager to repay the kindness she was receiving. Leo played on the floor with some wooden toys Joe had made years ago for the son they had lost. "Mrs. Rose," Marina said as she carefully chopped onions, "you and Mr. Joe have been so good to us. But I'm worried." "Worried about what, my child?" "About what might happen if that bad man finds out you're hiding us." Marina's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to get hurt because of us." Rose stopped what she was doing and knelt beside the girl, holding her small hands in hers. "Marina, listen to me carefully. Sometimes in life, you have to choose between what is easy and what is right. Hiding you might be dangerous, but abandoning 2 children would be wrong. Do you understand?" Marina nodded, but the tears kept falling. "I just don't want any more good people to suffer because of me." "You're not causing anyone to suffer, dear. The one causing suffering is a man like Mr. Blackwood, who thinks he can humiliate and punish those who can't defend themselves." A noise from outside made them both freeze. Footsteps approaching the house, low voices talking. Rose quickly led Marina and Leo to the back room, where they had prepared a hiding spot behind an old wardrobe. "Stay very quiet," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." Rose returned to the kitchen, just as a knock sounded on the door. Her heart leaped, but she forced a calm expression before opening it. "Mrs. Miller." It was Gary, Blackwood's employee, accompanied by 2 other men. "Sorry to bother you, but we're searching the neighborhood. May I come in?" "Of course, Gary, come on in." Rose stepped away from the door, praying. Her voice sounded natural. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Thank you, but we're in a hurry." Gary looked around the simple room, noticing the table was set for more people than usual. "Have you had visitors?" "My sister came to spend a few days with us," Rose lied smoothly. "She brought her children." "How old are the children?" Rose's heart nearly stopped, but she maintained her composure. "They're a bit older. Young ladies, really." Gary nodded, but his eyes continued to scan the house. He walked into the kitchen and noticed 3 bowls in the sink, still with remnants of soup. "This sister of yours, where is she now?" "They went to the next town over to do some shopping. They should be back this afternoon." One of the men with Gary whispered something in his ear. Rose couldn't hear it, but she saw the employee's expression change slightly. "Mrs. Miller, you wouldn't mind if we took a look in the other rooms, would you? Just following orders, you understand?" Rose knew she had no choice. "Of course, feel free." And then, as the men searched the house, Rose prayed silently that the children would remain hidden and completely silent. The silence in the back room was deafening. Marina held Leo against her chest, one hand gently covering her little brother's mouth, to ensure he made no sound. Through the cracks in the wardrobe, she could hear the heavy footsteps of the men searching the house, opening doors and moving furniture. "Are you sure you saw suspicious movement around here?" Gary's voice came muffled to the hiding spot. "I'm sure," answered a voice Marina didn't recognize. "I saw the woman talking to 2 small children in the yard yesterday morning. I thought it was strange because she never has visitors." Rose's heart nearly stopped when she heard those words. Someone had been watching her house, had seen the children. Her knees trembled, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "Mrs. Miller," Gary approached, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "It seems someone saw children at your house yesterday. Are you sure they were just your nieces?" "Of course I'm sure," Rose replied, surprised at the firmness in her own voice. "My nieces were playing in the yard just yesterday. Like I said, they went to the next town this morning." But Gary didn't look convinced. He motioned to the other men, who began to search more systematically. Rose followed them, trying to seem cooperative, while inwardly praying like she had never prayed before. It was when they reached the back room that everything changed. Leo, frightened by the strange noises and voices, began to whimper softly. It was an almost imperceptible sound, but in such a tense environment, it sounded as loud as a scream. Gary stopped immediately, his head turning toward the wardrobe. What was that noise? "It must be the cat," Rose said quickly, but her voice was trembling now. "He hides when strangers are in the house." But Gary was already approaching the wardrobe, his eyes fixed on the old wood. "Let's have a look." Marina squeezed her eyes, shut, hugging Leo even tighter. This was it. They would be discovered, and Rose and Joe would pay dearly for trying to protect them. Silent tears streamed down her face as she braced for the worst. Gary reached out to open the wardrobe when a terrible crash came from the yard. It sounded as if something very heavy had knocked over several things at once. Shouts and whinnies mixed in a commotion that sent everyone running to the window. "What the hell is going on out there?" Gary left the wardrobe behind and ran too. See what had caused such a racket. Rose and the men crowded at the window and saw a surreal scene. Tempest had appeared in the yard and was causing absolute chaos, knocking over flower pots, kicking over water buckets, and running back and forth, as if it had gone completely mad. "It's the boss's horse," one of the men yelled. "It's escaped from the stables." "We need to catch him before he gets hurt or causes more damage," Gary said, already running for the door. "Mrs. Miller, we'll be back later to finish the search." "Of course, Gary, I'll be here." Rose watched from the window as the 3 men tried to capture Tempest. The white horse seemed to be enjoying the chase, always slipping away at the last second, leading them further and further from the house. It was as if it knew exactly what it was doing. Only when the men had completely disappeared from view did Rose run to the back room and open the wardrobe. Marina and Leo emerged, both trembling and in tears. "My goodness, that was a close call," Rose whispered, hugging the 2 children. "But how did Tempest know you were in danger?" Marina looked out the window, where she could still see the white horse in the distance, now allowing the men to approach. "He saved us again," she murmured in awe. "It's like he's our guardian angel." But Rose knew the situation had changed drastically. Now Blackwood was certain the children were being hidden by someone in town. The search would be intensified, and it would only be a matter of time before they returned, this time with more men and less patience. "We need to think of something," Rose said, more to herself than to the children. "We can't stay here anymore." When Joe came home a few hours later, he found Rose quickly packing some clothes and supplies. The children were sitting on the bed, Leo in Marina's lap, both with frightened expressions. "What happened?" Joe asked, already sensing that something had gone wrong. Rose told him about the visit from Gary and the other men, about how Tempest had appeared at the exact right moment to distract them. Joe listened in silence, his face growing graver with every word. "Blackwood will step up the search now," he said finally, "and he'll start suspecting his own employees. It's not safe to keep the children here anymore." "So, what do we do?" Rose asked, her voice filled with anguish. Joe looked at Marina and Leo, two innocent children who had become the center of a storm of cruelty and greed. "We'll need to find help outside of town," he said slowly. "But first, I need to have a serious talk with Tempest." Retired schoolteacher Eleanor Vance adjusted her glasses on her nose as she watched the unusual activity on the street from her window. At 72, she had taught nearly every child in Harmony Creek for 4 decades, and little escaped her sharp attention. That afternoon, she had witnessed the strange scene of Blackwood's men chasing a white horse through the center of town. And her educator's intuition told her there was more to the story than met the eye. "Very strange," she muttered to herself, making notes in a journal she always kept handy. Over years of teaching, she had developed the habit of documenting important events, a practice that might now be more useful than she imagined. 2 streets over, John Sullivan was closing his small grocery store with a heavy heart. As a local merchant, he knew every family in town and their exact financial situation. He had seen people go hungry before, but never children so young in such a desperate state. "It's not right," he said to his wife Carmen as he counted the day's coins. "A 6-year-old girl shouldn't be stealing bread out of desperation. She should be in school, playing, being a kid." Carmen nodded gravely. "And that man wanting to hit her with a cane. John, that's monstrous. Even if she had stolen, a child doesn't deserve to be treated like an animal." "The problem is, no one has the courage to stand up to Blackwood," John sighed. "He controls everything in this town. Anyone who opposes him loses their job, their house, everything." "But what if it wasn't just us? What if other people are thinking the same thing?" In the house next to the grocery, Tony Barzini, one of the few who dared to maintain some independence from Blackwood, was talking to his daughter Maria about the recent events. Tony owned a small auto repair shop that served neighboring towns, which gave him some protection from local pressures. "Dad, everyone's talking about those kids," Maria said, concerned. "They say Blackwood has offered a reward to find them. And what do you think about that, honey?" "I think it's wrong. Completely wrong." Maria was 25 and worked as a nurse at the local health clinic. "I've seen those kids a few times. They're malnourished, scared. They need medical care, not punishment." Tony nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Maria, sometimes I wonder if it's not time for some people in this town to stop being afraid and start doing what's right." Meanwhile, at the miller's house, the tension was palpable. Joe had returned from the stables with worrying news. Blackwood was questioning all his employees about possible sympathizers, and the pressure was mounting exponentially. "He suspects me," Joe confessed to Rose in a low voice. "Today, he asked me directly if I'd seen anything suspicious, if I knew anyone who might be hiding the children." "What did you say?" "I lied, said I didn't know anything." Joe ran his hands through his gray hair. "Rose, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Marina, who had overheard the conversation, approached the couple with Leo in her arms. "Mr. Joe, Mrs. Rose, Leo and I can leave. We don't want to cause any more trouble for you." "No, my child," Rose said firmly. "You're not going anywhere alone. We'll find a solution." Just then, a soft knock sounded on the back door. Joe tensed immediately, but the knock had a different pattern. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2 taps. It was a code he recognized. "It's Eleanor," Rose whispered, relieved. Eleanor Vance was one of the few people they trusted completely. Joe opened the door to find not only Eleanor, but also John and Carmen from the grocery store, and Tony and Maria. They all wore serious, determined expressions. "We need to talk," Eleanor said without preamble, "about the children." "Come in." Quickly, Joe ushered them inside, checking to see if anyone was watching. Eleanor went directly to Marina and Leo, kneeling to their level. "Hello, dears. I'm Miss Eleanor. I hear you've been going through some difficult times." Leo hid behind Marina, but the girl looked into the teacher's kind eyes and nodded shyly. "Well," Eleanor stood up and looked at the assembled group, "we've all come to the same conclusion. What's happening in this town isn't fair, it isn't humane, and we can no longer stay silent." "I agree," John said firmly. "Blackwood may have money and power, but that doesn't give him the right to terrorize children." Maria approached Marina. "I'm a nurse. May I check you both? I want to make sure you're healthy." "What are you proposing?" Joe asked, though he already suspected the answer. "We're proposing that we stop being afraid," Tony said. "We're proposing that we unite to protect these children and show Blackwood he can't do whatever he wants to innocent people." Eleanor opened her journal and showed them the notes she'd been taking. "I've been documenting all the events of the last few days. If we need it, we have evidence of his abusive behavior." "But Blackwood has so much power," Rose said, worried. "He could ruin all of you." "He can try," Carmen said with surprising determination. "But together we're stronger, and there are more people in town who think like us. I'm sure of it." Marina looked at all these adults discussing how to protect her and felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in the world after all. Outside, Tempest grazed peacefully, but its ears were always alert, as if it knew that important changes were happening and that its protective role would be needed more than ever. The group gathered at the miller's house planned all night. Eleanor had brought maps of the region. John contributed information about the town's supply routes, and Tony offered his workshop as an alternative meeting point. But it was Maria who brought the most important news of all. "I have a friend who works in the next town, Stonehaven," she explained. "She's a social worker and deals with cases of at-risk children. If we can get Marina and Leo to her, they can get official help." "But how?" Rose asked. "Blackwood has men watching all the roads out of town." "There's a path through the mountains," Tony said thoughtfully. "It's tougher, but almost no one knows it. My dad used to take me hunting there when I was a kid." Eleanor adjusted her glasses and made more notes. "We need time to organize everything, and we need to make sure the children are strong enough for the journey." During this discussion, Leo had grown accustomed to the adult's presence. Unlike his usual behavior, always quiet and scared, he began to walk around the room, observing each person with curiosity. When his eyes landed on Eleanor, who was constantly writing in her journal, he approached and gently touched her pencil. "Do you want to draw, little one?" Eleanor asked in a sweet voice, tearing out a blank sheet and offering him the pencil. Leo took the pencil in his small hands and began to scribble on the paper. But they weren't random scribbles. A recognizable shape was emerging. A horse. A white horse. "Look at this," Eleanor called the others' attention. "He's drawing Tempest." Marina came over and smiled at her brother's drawing. It was the first time she had seen him interested in any activity besides sleeping and eating. "Leo was always smart," she said with pride. Before our parents died, he loved to draw. He doesn't talk much, does he? Maria observed with her nurse's eye. Almost never, Marina confirmed. Since we've been alone, he barely says a few words. I think he's been too scared. Leo continued to draw, now adding small figures next to the horse. When he was done, he showed the paper to Marina. In the drawing, there was Tempest, and beside it 2 little figures holding hands, clearly him and Marina. Very beautiful, Leo, Eleanor praised. Do you want to tell me about your drawing? Leo looked at her, then at the drawing, and to everyone's surprise. His small, clear voice broke the silence. Good horse. Bad man. An emotional silence fell over the room. They were the first complete words Leo had spoken since arriving at the miller's house. Marina hugged her little brother, tears in her eyes. That's right, Leo, she whispered. Good horse, bad man. Eleanor felt her heart ache. Sweetheart, can you tell me more about the bad man? Leo hesitated, looking around the room at all the unkind faces watching him. Then, with the brutal honesty only children possess, he said, Bad man want to hit Ina. Horse say no. And what do you think of the horse? John asked gently. Horse protect, Leo replied with conviction. Horse love Ina and Leo. The child's simple words had a profound impact on everyone present. It was the purest possible confirmation of Blackwood's cruelty and Tempest's extraordinary goodness. Carmen discreetly wiped her eyes. If a 3-year-old can see the difference between good and evil so clearly, how have we adults stayed silent for so long? What's important is that we're not silent anymore, Tony said firmly. Leo, encouraged by the adult's positive reaction, continued speaking. Leo, hungry before, so hungry. Ina too. Ina get bread for Leo to eat. Your sister is very brave, Eleanor said, stroking the girl's hair. She loves you very much. Ina is the best sister in the world, Leo declared, hugging Marina tightly. At that moment, a noise from outside put everyone on alert. Joe carefully approached the window and relaxed when he saw Tempest in the yard, seemingly trying to get their attention. It's Tempest, he announced. Looks like he wants to show us something. The group went out into the yard and saw the horse agitated, pointing its head toward the main street. In the distance, they could see lanterns moving. A nighttime search was being organized. Blackwood really doesn't give up, John muttered. Leo, seeing Tempest, ran toward the horse without fear. Good horse! Horse save Leo and Ina! Tempest lowered its head and allowed Leo to touch it, as if recognizing the child's purity and gratitude. It was then that Leo said something no one expected. Leo want to ride good horse. Leo not scared anymore. Marina was astonished. Her little brother, who had always been afraid of everything, was asking to ride the horse. It was as if Tempest had not only protected them physically, but had also helped Leo find his courage. Maybe tomorrow, Leo, Eleanor said softly. Right now we need to go inside and hide. But as the group headed back into the house, they all carried in their hearts the strength of Leo's simple words. A child had spoken the purest truth. There was good and evil in the world, and they had chosen the right side of the fight. The lanterns were getting closer, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't facing the darkness alone. Dawn brought an unusual stir to the streets of Harmony Creek. Eleanor Vance had worked through the night, not only organizing the children's escape plan, but also drafting a detailed letter she sent at first light to the authorities in Stonehaven. Her experience as an educator had taught her the importance of proper documentation. For decades, she had observed children in difficult situations and knew exactly which words to use to get the attention of the competent authorities. To whom it may concern, she had written in her careful script, I am writing to report a situation of grave abuse of power and threats to minors in our town. The letter meticulously described the events of the past few days, including the attempted violence against Marina, the systematic persecution of the orphaned children, and the use of economic intimidation to silence the population. Eleanor had been careful to include dates, times, and the names of witnesses. Meanwhile, in the Blackwood mansion, Augustus paced like a caged beast. The nighttime search had yielded nothing, and his frustration was growing exponentially. Worse, he had started to notice different looks from the townspeople, less fear, more judgment. "Gary," he yelled at his most loyal employee, "I want you to double the men on the search, and I want you to start putting pressure on the merchants. Cut off supplies to anyone you suspect is hiding information." "Yes, sir, but Mr. Blackwood, some people are starting to complain openly about the searches. They say we're invading homes without cause." "Complain?" Blackwood's eyes glinted dangerously. "Are you telling me these insignificant people now think they can question my decisions?" "It's not exactly that, sir. It's just that Miss Eleanor has been talking to a lot of people and—" "Eleanor Vance!" Blackwood slammed his fist on the desk. "I knew that meddling old woman would cause trouble. It's time to remind her of her place in this town." But before Blackwood could elaborate on his retaliation plans, one of the lookouts came running to the mansion with news that changed everything. "Mr. Blackwood, there's an official vehicle coming into town. Looks like it's from the regional." "Sheriff's Department!" Blackwood felt the blood run cold in his veins. Outside authorities rarely visited Harmony Creek, and when they did, it was usually in response to serious complaints. "How many vehicles?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Two, sir. A sheriff's car and another one that looks like it's from social services." At the miller's house, the relief was palpable when Eleanor arrived with the news that her letter had worked faster than she had hoped. "They're coming to investigate the children's situation," she announced, her eyes shining with satisfaction. "My social worker friend in Stonehaven has good contacts, and it seems they took the report very seriously." Marina held Leo in her lap, both still frightened by the idea that strangers were coming because of them. "Are they going to take us away?" she asked in a small voice. "I don't know, dear," Rose answered honestly, "but what I do know is that they will make sure you are safe. That's what matters." Joe watched from the window as the official vehicles entered the town. "There they are," he announced. "Two women and a man. They look determined." Detective Sandra Miles and social worker Carmen Santos had made the 3-hour drive from Stonehaven after receiving Eleanor's letter. Sandra, a 40-year-old woman with 20 years of experience in abuse of power cases, had immediately recognized the signs of a situation that needed urgent intervention. "Carmen," she said as they observed the town, "from the letter's description, we're dealing with a classic case of intimidation and possible child abuse. I need you to be prepared for anything." Carmen Santos, an experienced social worker, nodded. "From what I've read, the children may be traumatized. I'll need to gain their trust before anything else." The third member of the team, Dr. Robert Mendez, was a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma. "If we confirm there was an attempted act of violence against a 6-year-old, we'll have legal grounds for immediate action," he said, reviewing the documents. The investigators' first stop was Eleanor Vance's house. The retired teacher received them with dignity and presented not only her detailed documentation, but also the people who had witnessed the events. "John and Carmen from the grocery store saw the whole initial scene," Eleanor explained. "Tony and Maria can confirm the children's condition. And Joe has an interesting story to tell about the horse's behavior." Detective Miles listened attentively to each testimony, taking careful notes. What emerged was a clear picture of abuse of power and systematic intimidation. "Where are the children now?" Carmen Santos asked. "In a safe place," Eleanor replied. "But if you'll permit me, I'd like you to see something very special before you meet them." Eleanor led the group to the Blackwood stables, where Tempest was being kept. Joe met them there, and what they saw next left the investigators speechless. When Joe called for Tempest, the horse approached and, in a completely unusual manner, began to display what seemed like intentional behaviors. It pointed its head toward the miller's house, walked a few steps in that direction, came back, and repeated the gesture. "It's as if he's trying to lead us to the children," Dr. Mendez murmured, impressed. "In 30 years of my career, I've never seen such specific animal behavior." It was at that moment that Blackwood appeared, accompanied by Gary and other employees. His face was red with rage, but he tried to maintain a facade of courtesy. "Detective," he said with a forced smile, "welcome to our humble town. How can I help you?" Sandra looked him directly in the eye. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume. We've received serious allegations concerning the improper treatment of minors. We'd like to ask you a few questions." The confrontation between Detective Miles and Blackwood took place in the center of town, with a crowd of residents quietly gathering to watch. For the first time in decades, someone was openly questioning the most powerful man in Harmony Creek. "Mr. Blackwood," Sandra began in a firm voice, "we have reports that you attempted to physically assault a 6-year-old child with a cane. Is that true?" Blackwood tried to maintain his composure, but Sandra could see the nervousness in his eyes. "Detective, there's been a misunderstanding. The child was stealing from my property. I merely intended to teach an educational lesson." "An educational lesson?" Dr. Mendez interjected. "Sir, we're talking about a starving child who took a piece of bread. Do you consider it appropriate to use physical violence against a child under those circumstances?" "You don't understand how things work here," Blackwood retorted, losing some of his forced diplomacy. "If we allow these people to do whatever they want, we'll soon have total chaos." Carmen Santos, the social worker, stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood, a 6-year-old orphan and her 3-year-old brother do not pose a threat to the social order. They represent a humanitarian emergency." It was then that Eleanor appeared, accompanied by Joe, Rose, John, Tony, and Maria. The group of residents who had decided to no longer remain silent walked united toward the authorities. "Detective," Eleanor said with dignity, "we would like to present the children and offer our formal testimonies." Blackwood watched in growing horror as people he considered completely under his control positioned themselves against him publicly. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered threateningly. "You'll all regret this." "Mr. Blackwood," Sandra said with authority, "that sounds like a threat. I hope that's not the case." Joe addressed the detective directly. "Ma'am, I've worked for Mr. Blackwood for 15 years. During that time, I've seen a lot of things that weren't right, but I never had the courage to speak up. What happened to these children was the last straw." "And what exactly did you see?" Dr. Mendez asked. "I saw a man raise a cane against a helpless child. I saw him order his own horse to be tortured for protecting the girl. I saw him spread lies about orphaned children so no one would help them." Joe took a deep breath. "And I saw an entire town afraid to speak the truth." Blackwood completely lost his composure. "Joe, you're fired, and all of you," he pointed at the group, "are going to find out what happens to those who defy me." "Mr. Blackwood," Sandra intervened firmly, "you are incriminating yourself. I suggest you stop talking and consider getting a lawyer." At that moment, Rose appeared, leading Marina and Leo by the hand. The children were clean, well-fed, but still visibly nervous about the whole situation. Carmen Santos knelt to the children's level. "Hello, sweethearts. I'm Carmen. I'm here to make sure you're safe. Can you tell me what happened?" Marina looked at Rose, who nodded encouragingly. "Are you going to take us away?" she asked in a small voice. "I'm not taking you anywhere without talking a lot first and making sure you're comfortable," Carmen replied gently. "But first Need to understand what happened. Leo, surprisingly, was the one who broke the silence. Looking directly at Blackwood, he pointed a finger and said clearly, "Bad man. Wanted to hit Ina. Horse said no." And the brutal simplicity of Leo's statement caused a profound silence to fall over the crowd. A 3-year-old child had summed up the entire situation in a few honest words. Dr. Mendez approached. "Leo, can you tell me how you feel when you see that man?" "Scared," Leo answered immediately. "Very scared." Leo and Ina run and hide. Blackwood, seeing the situation was completely out of his control, tried one last gambit. "These people are manipulating the children. Joe kidnapped those children. He's the real criminal here." But then something extraordinary happened. Tempest, who had remained in the stables until that moment, suddenly appeared in the square. The white horse headed directly for where the children stood, completely ignoring Blackwood. Leo ran to Tempest without any fear. "Good horse. Horse protects." "Leo!" Tempest lowered its head and allowed Leo to hug him, while Marina approached to stroke his mane. The children's absolute trust in the animal, contrasted with the obvious fear they showed in Blackwood's presence, was more eloquent than any testimony. "Fascinating," Dr. Mendez murmured. "The children display clear trauma in the presence of the alleged aggressor, but total trust in the animal that supposedly protected them." Sandra observed the entire scene with the experienced eyes of an investigator. The children's behavior, the residents' attitudes, Blackwood's excessive defensiveness, it all pointed to the same conclusion. "Mr. Blackwood," she said firmly, "you are under investigation for attempted assault on a minor, intimidation, abuse of power, and creating an environment of psychological terror. I strongly recommend you cooperate with our investigation." Blackwood looked around and realized he was completely isolated. Even his own employees avoided his gaze. The town he had controlled through fear had finally found the courage to face him. "This isn't over," he said quietly, but his voice no longer carried the authority of before. It was just the empty threat of a man who had lost all his power. As Sandra proceeded with the formal investigation, Marina held Leo's hand, both finally feeling that maybe, after so much suffering, justice was truly coming to Harmony Creek. The formal investigation lasted 3 intense days. Detective Miles and her team interviewed nearly every resident of Harmony Creek, and what they uncovered was a systematic pattern of abuse of power that stretched back decades. Blackwood had not only tried to harm Marina, he had created a regime of terror that kept the entire town subjugated. Dr. Mendez spent long hours talking with Marina and Leo, using specialized techniques to assess their childhood trauma. His conclusions were devastating for Blackwood. Both children showed clear signs of post-traumatic stress, specifically related to the threats they had received. "Marina," Dr. Mendez said during one of their sessions, "can you tell me how you felt before all this happened?" The girl thought carefully before answering. "I was afraid of being hungry, doctor. Afraid Leo would cry and I couldn't help. But I wasn't afraid of people. And now I'm afraid that bad people hurt kids just because they can." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why did that man want to hit me? I just wanted to feed my little brother." Carmen Santos, who was observing the session, felt her heart break. "Marina, you know you did nothing wrong, right? Taking care of your brother is a very beautiful thing." "I know that now," Marina replied. "But at the time I thought I was going to die." Meanwhile, Blackwood watched his decades-long empire completely crumble. The investigation revealed not only the incident with the children, but also years of labor exploitation, intimidation of merchants, and use of influence to prevent abuse cases from reaching the proper authorities. "Mr. Blackwood," Sandra confronted him during the final interrogation, We have 17 witnesses to the incident with the child, documentation of abusive labor practices dating back 10 years, and evidence that you use economic intimidation to control the population. How do you respond to these accusations? Blackwood, now without the arrogance of the previous days, attempted a pathetic defense. I was just trying to maintain order. This town needs discipline. Discipline or terror? Dr. Mendez interjected. Because, based on our interviews, practically the entire population of this town lives in fear of your reactions. It was then that something unexpected happened. Gary, Blackwood's most loyal employee, asked to speak privately with Sandra. "Detective," he said with a trembling voice, "I need to tell you some things that have happened over the years that I never had the courage to report." Gary revealed a series of abuses he had witnessed. Workers fired for questioning unsafe conditions, families evicted for refusing to sell their land below market price, and several attempts to silence people who could testify against Blackwood. "Why are you speaking up now?" Sandra asked. "Because when I saw that man raise a cane against a 6-year-old girl, I realized I was also responsible for all these years of silence. My own daughter is 6. How would I explain to her that I saw a girl her age being threatened and did nothing?" Gary's confession was the final piece Sandra needed. Blackwood wasn't just a cruel man, he was a habitual criminal who used economic power to escape the consequences of his actions. While the formal investigation unfolded, something beautiful was happening on the other side of town. Marina and Leo had been temporarily settled with Rose and Joe, but now the entire community was participating in their care. Eleanor had organized informal classes for Marina, helping her catch up on her missed education. John and Carmen from the grocery store ensured the children would never go hungry again. Maria, the nurse, monitored their health, and Tony had begun teaching Marina small crafts, showing her there were many dignified ways to earn a living. But it was Tempest who provided the most moving moment. Leo, who had completely overcome his fear, now played daily with the horse. Marina had also developed a special connection with the animal that had saved them. "Tempest is our guardian angel," Leo said one afternoon as he carefully brushed the horse's mane. "He showed up when we needed him and protected us." Marina nodded, hugging the horse's neck. "Thank you," she whispered in its ear. "Thank you for saving us." It was as if Tempest understood. The horse tilted its head and gently touched the girl's face with its muzzle, a gesture of affection that moved everyone present. On the last day of the investigation, Carmen Santos sat down with Rose and Joe to discuss the children's future. "You saved Marina and Leo," she said sincerely. "You not only protected them physically, but you offered the love and care they needed to heal." "They're our children now," Rose said firmly. "If you'll allow it, we would very much like to officially adopt them." Carmen smiled. "Nothing would make me happier. You've shown that you are exactly the kind of family these children deserve." It was then that Leo, who was playing in the yard with Tempest, came running into the house. "Mommy Rose, Daddy Joe, Marina, come see!" Everyone rushed into the yard and saw something extraordinary. Tempest was lying on the grass, and Marina was sitting on its back, not riding, but simply resting against him as if he were a living sofa. Leo was beside them, stroking the horse's mane. "Look," Leo said in his clear little voice, "we're a family. Marina, Leo, Daddy Joe, Mommy Rose, and our horse brother Tempest." At that moment, with the golden afternoon sun illuminating the scene, everyone understood that something much greater than justice had occurred in Harmony Creek. A transformation of the human heart had taken place, from fear to courage, from cruelty to compassion, from loneliness to unconditional love. 6 months after the events that changed Harmony Creek forever, Augustus Blackwood sat alone in his mansion, now much emptier and quieter. The investigations had resulted in several formal charges, heavy fines, and most devastating of all, complete social isolation. No one in town spoke to him, no one did business with him, no one even greeted him on the street. For the first time in decades, Blackwood was experiencing something he had never known: forced humility. With no employees to intimidate, no power to wield, no respect to command, he was just a lonely man confronting the weight of his past actions. On that Saturday morning, as had become his habit, Blackwood watched from his window the transformation that had occurred in the town. The town square, once a place where people walked hurriedly with their heads down for fear of crossing his path, now bustled with cheerful activity. Eleanor Vance had established a community school where Marina, now 7, was one of the brightest students. The girl had not only caught up on her missed education, but demonstrated an intelligence and compassion that impressed all her teachers. Leo, at 4, was a completely transformed child. The quiet, frightened boy had become a constant source of laughter and positive energy. His passion for horses had expanded to all animals, and he was often seen helping other residents care for their pets. Joe and Rose had finalized the children's adoption, and the Miller family was now recognized as an example of love and dedication throughout the region. Rose had fulfilled her dream of being a mother again, and Joe had discovered a patience and tenderness he never knew he possessed. But what caught Blackwood's attention most was Tempest. The white horse had become a sort of town mascot, free to wander wherever it pleased, always accompanied by Marina and Leo. The connection between the children and the animal remained an extraordinary thing to witness. That morning, Blackwood saw Marina and Leo arriving in the square riding Tempest. The girl guided the horse with confidence, while Leo, sitting behind her, waved cheerfully to everyone they met. It was a scene of pure joy that made Blackwood's heart ache in a way he couldn't fully comprehend. It was then that something unexpected happened. Leo saw Blackwood in the window, and instead of showing fear or anger, he waved at him. It was a simple, innocent wave from a child who held no grudges. Blackwood was shocked. This child, whom he had terrorized, was forgiving him. He hesitantly waved back, and Leo smiled before turning his attention back to Tempest. In that moment, something broke inside Blackwood. Tears, something he hadn't experienced in decades, began to stream down his face. For the first time, he clearly saw the monstrosity of his past actions. He had tried to harm an innocent child. He had created an environment of terror where community should have existed. He had used his power to cause suffering instead of help. Blackwood descended the stairs of his mansion and, for the first time in months, stepped out onto the street. He walked slowly to the square, where Marina and Leo were playing with Tempest. The people around him tensed at his presence, but they didn't flee as they once had. "Marina!" he called softly as he got near. The girl turned, her hand instinctively gripping Tempest's mane for security, but there was no longer terror in her eyes, only caution. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied politely, I wanted to apologize." The words struggled out of his throat. "For what I tried to do to you, for the fear I caused. You didn't deserve any of it." Marina exchanged a look with Leo, who nodded as if encouraging her. "It's okay," she said simply. "Leo and I learned that forgiving makes you feel better." The simplicity of the answer completely devastated Blackwood. You forgive me?" "We forgive you," Leo said in his clear voice. "But you have to promise to be nice to other kids." Blackwood knelt in the dust of the square, bringing himself to the children's level. "I promise, and I want to do more than that. I want to try to make right some of the bad things I've done." Eleanor Vance, who had been watching the entire scene, approached. "Mr. Blackwood, if you're serious about making things right, we have a list of families who were harmed over the years. Perhaps you could start there." Blackwood nodded vigorously. Yes, I want to do that. I want to try to be a better person." Thus began the true transformation of Harmony Creek. Blackwood not only paid reparations to the families he had harmed, but also funded Eleanor's school, renovated the homes of needy families, and established a permanent fund to ensure no child in town ever went hungry. The change in Blackwood was not immediate or easy. Decades of cruelty and selfishness don't vanish overnight. But the constant presence of Marina and Leo in his life, always kind, always willing to give him a second chance, gradually transformed his hardened heart. Tempest also played an important role in this transformation. The horse, which had once completely rejected its former owner, slowly began to accept his presence again, especially when Blackwood showed genuine kindness to the children. On the eve of the first anniversary of the events that changed everything, Blackwood made one last grand gesture. He officially donated Tempest to Marina and Leo, acknowledging that the horse had found its true family. Tempest always knew where the real love was, Blackwood said as he signed the papers. He taught me that real strength doesn't come from power over others, but from the ability to protect and care for those in need. That night, Marina wrote in her diary, "A gift from Eleanor. Today I learned that even the worst people can become good if they really want to. And that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting what happened, but deciding that love is stronger than anger." A full year had passed since that sunny afternoon when Marina had knelt in the dust of the main street, begging for mercy. Now in the same square where fear once reigned, the first Harmony Creek Festival of Hope was being celebrated, a tradition Eleanor Vance had proposed to celebrate the town's transformation. Marina, now 8, rode proudly on Tempest through, the square decorated with colorful banners. Her light blue dress, a gift from Rose for the special occasion, swayed gently as the white horse walked with the dignity of one who knew he was loved and admired by the entire community. "Just look at our girl," Rose whispered to Joe, her eyes shining with motherly pride. "Who would have thought the scared child we found would become this confident, radiant young woman?" Leo, now 5 and riding behind Marina, waved enthusiastically. At the cheering crowd, the boy had grown strong and healthy, his crystal-clear laughter echoing through the square like music. He had become the official communicator between Tempest and all the other children in town, teaching them how to approach the horse with respect and affection. "Hey, everyone!" Leo shouted to the crowd in his clear voice. "Tempest wants to say he loves you all." The crowd laughed and cheered even louder. Tempest, as if truly understanding, inclined his head majestically, causing his white mane to sway in the wind. Eleanor watched the scene from her special chair on the platform of honor they had built for her. At 73, she had become not only the principal of the community school, but also the official chronicler of Harmony Creek's transformation. Her journal, now filled with stories of hope instead of reports of abuse, documented every small miracle that had happened in the town. "Miss Vance," a young reporter from the next town over approached, "could you comment on the changes you've witnessed here?" Eleanor smiled, adjusting her glasses. "My dear, I have witnessed one of the most extraordinary transformations a person can see in a lifetime. I saw a community discover that together, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. I saw children teach adults about forgiveness, and I saw an animal demonstrate that true love knows no species." On the other side of the square, Blackwood watched the celebration. He didn't participate directly. He was still earning back the community's full trust, but his presence was tolerated and even welcomed by some. He wore simple clothes instead of his expensive suits, and his eyes, once cold and calculating, now showed a genuine humility. Beside him stood Carmen Santos, the social worker who had returned specifically for the festival. "Mr. Blackwood, how do you feel seeing all this?" "I feel shame for the man I was," he answered honestly. But I also feel gratitude for being given a second chance to do what's right. These children taught me that it's never too late to choose to be better. John and Carmen from the grocery store had set up a special stall at the festival, giving out free loaves of bread to all the children, a silent tribute to the bread that had started it all. Every child who received a loaf heard the story of Marina and Leo, ensuring the lessons of courage and compassion were passed on to the next generations. Tony and Maria had expanded their businesses and now offered jobs to young people in town, including apprenticeship programs that ensured no teenager was left without opportunities. Tony's workshop had become a community center, where people of all ages gathered to learn new skills and share stories. As the day wore on, the most anticipated moment of the festival arrived: Marina and Leo's special performance with Tempest. The crowd gathered in a circle as the siblings demonstrated the incredible connection they had developed with the horse. Marina guided Tempest through a series of elegant movements, not as a tamer, but as a partner. Leo sang a song he had composed about friendship and protection, his small but clear voice echoing through the silent square. Tempest, our special friend, came to us when we were in need. He protected us with his big heart and made all our fears recede. Now we are a family bound by a love so true. Tempest, Marina and Leo forever together, forever safe and new. When the performance ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Even Blackwood discreetly wiped away tears, awed by the capacity for forgiveness and love in these extraordinary children. Eleanor stood for the final speech of the festival. My dear friends and neighbors, today we celebrate not only the transformation of our town, but the proof that love always conquers fear, that compassion always overcomes cruelty, and that even one small act of kindness can change the entire world. She looked directly at Marina and Leo. These two children have taught us that true strength comes not from power over others, but from the courage to do what is right. Even when it's hard, they have shown us that forgiveness is a brave choice and that we must never give up on hope. As the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky gold and rose, Marina and Leo rode one last time through the square on Tempest. People waved and smiled, children ran alongside the horse, and the entire community felt united by something larger than themselves. That night, Marina wrote in her diary, "Today I learned that our story isn't about what happened to us, but about how we chose to respond to what happened. Leo and I chose to forgive, to love, and to trust, and Tempest taught us that sometimes angels come in forms we don't expect." Leo, now able to write thanks to Eleanor's lessons, added his own line in his sister's diary, and that families aren't just made of blood, but of love. Tempest, grazing peacefully in the miller's yard on that starry night, lifted his head toward the full moon and neighed softly, a sound that everyone in town interpreted as one of approval and gratitude. Harmony Creek had become a place where children played without fear, where neighbors helped each other, and where a white horse remained an eternal symbol that good always triumphs when brave people decide to fight for it. The story of Marina, Leo, and Tempest had become a legend, passed from generation to generation, reminding everyone to never underestimate the power of a kind heart, the strength of a united community, and the magic that happens when we choose to protect those who need our protection most.